It's been a long time since I picked up my controller to dive back into The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and after seeing all of the online conversation about this game, I started to wonder if this classic really deserves that legendary status that we've given it, or if it's just riding on that sweet nostalgia. Well, lucky for you, we're about to find out. This game was the blueprint for action-adventure titles, but now we're spoiled with the entire series, including games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So first, I needed to decide how I was going to play this game. I wanted to play on the TV, and I wanted handheld. I could play the Game Boy Advanced version, or I could do the Nintendo Switch Online version, but why make it easy when I could play on these? Yep, Hyperkin decided to send me their SupaRetron HD, a much less expensive alternative to the Super Nintendo with HDMI built in, and I also bought their SupaBoy because I had to try this thing. This one they didn't send, to be clear. This is just a straight Brandon curiosity. I had to try this. So there we go. TV and handheld. I love this push for modern retro setups. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of retro games with a major dose of RPGs and nostalgia, then go ahead and smash that subscribe button like it's a pot full of rupees in a random person's house. Also, don't forget to hit like and that notification bell. All right, let's get into it. First, let's start with my take on the Hyperkin SupaRetron HD. This thing plays and feels like a modern-day Super Nintendo. It plugs straight into your TV with HDMI, includes controllers that have wonderfully long cords, and eliminates the need for expensive upscalers or extra adapters. The setup was so simple. HDMI cord, power plug, cartridge, powered on, and bam, you're back in the 90s. The games look great on a modern HD TV. It's not some pixel-perfect remaster, but it's a clean experience that doesn't require you to fiddle with any settings. This is hands down one of the easiest ways to introduce people to those Super Nintendo classics without breaking the bank. Now, there are a couple of quirks that I do want to mention that are worth noting, though they didn't really break the experience for me. One, the startup screen. There's this quick Hyperkin logo screen that is there before the game boots up. It's a small thing, but it felt a little disruptive for games like A Link to the Past, where the intro is so iconic. And next, that eject button. Pressing the eject button on this thing is like launching your cartridge into low orbit. While it's hilarious the first time, those cartridges are not cheap anymore. So be prepared to catch your game. As someone who recently rebought a classic Super Nintendo and got an HD upscaler, this thing is a steal. At the price point, you get the simplicity of the setup and basically the same experience at a fraction of the cost. Hyperkin, you did a good job here. And stick around to the end if you want to hear my thoughts on the SupaBoy, because I don't want to waste any more time. Let's dive into what you came here for, Zelda. Now, my buddy Slam has played this game a ton, so I wanted to get his take on why he thinks this game is so good. What's up, Slam?
Hey, what's up, man?
Alright, homie, so I'm looking to play Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past again, so I want you to tell me why you think it's so good.
I'm so glad you asked. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past is a masterclass in game design with the way it blends exploration, combat, and puzzle solving into one seamless adventure. I mean, this all makes it just so much fun. The game's presentation is timeless with colorful visuals that exude charm. Ultimately, A Link to the Past is one of the best Zelda games ever made. You can't go wrong with this one, buddy.
Word. Got it. Okay, but I am gonna go do the thing, you know. So I went to the internet. Whoo boy, do people hold this game in high esteem. First off, the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance releases both won several awards, with the Game Boy Advance hitting a 95 on Metacritic. The context of this game is really interesting, and y'all know how much I love context. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was released in 1991 in Japan and 92 in North America. It was developed by Nintendo EAD, which stemmed from the creative department responsible for branching out into video games. After the top-down side-scrolling experiment that was Zelda 2, A Link to the Past was a return to the top-down style. This was the game that cemented core Zelda concepts like the dual world, which would come back in clever ways in other games, a ton of things to do, secrets to find, places to explore, and iconic enemies and races such as the River Zora that we got to see represented even in new games like Echoes of Wisdom. Much of the classic Zelda music we know and love came from this game as well, and it's so good. The Dark World theme lives in my head rent-free. We also get the Master Sword with this game, not to mention the only canonical pink-haired Link. They say pink-haired Link was because of a technical limitation, but we all know Miyamoto was like, but what if we just tried it and saw what happened? And this game was huge and has often been credited for inspiring games like Secret of Mana and Illusion of Gaia, 2 games I would love to get to on this channel. As for me, I picked this one up back in the day at FuncoLand. Let me know in the comments if you remember what FuncoLand was before GameStop bought it. And I played it after Ocarina of Time, since that was my entry point into the series. Well, aside from playing the original Zelda at my babysitter's house when I was a kid and kind of hating it because I had no idea what was going on. Thanks, FuncoLand! Now, with all that set up here, I wanted to see if this game is as fun as I remember. So I set out to play this roughly 15-hour game, and this is my experience. First off, A Link to the Past shines in its simplicity. The opening sequence with the rain pouring down as you sneak into Hyrule Castle is still one of the most atmospheric intros I've ever experienced. It sets the tone perfectly. There's adventure, there's mystery, and just enough danger to make you want to grab your sword and shield right away. Wait, that's how he gets his sword and shield? As soon as you're out saving Zelda, you're off on your adventure. And man, I didn't realize how much of the classic Zelda charm came from this game. The music, the characters, everything just screams quintessential Zelda. As I started exploring, I remembered that these old classics do not hold your hand, throws you into the deep end and says, go, be a hero. I mean, lack of direction isn't entirely accurate. You do have direction baked into the design of these games, and you do get these markers later on in your world map. When I hit Kakariko Village, there were so many little nooks and crannies to find. There were treasure chests with small puzzles, there were bombs to buy, which allowed you to get even more little treasures. It made looking around so much fun. And you know what was interesting? Some of the characters in this area were persuaded by these wanted posters that were put up by the castle.
I mean, to be fair, I did just go to their house, smash their pots, and blow up their walls, attacking their chickens as well.
And many still trusted Link, indicating that he had lived in this world. He must have been here before. What was he doing? Who are you, Link? Also, who dyed your hair? We need answers! As a side note, I love these little references like Mario in the picture frame in Kakariko. And that was just the beginning. This game is all about exploration, and it felt so good. The overworld is absolutely packed with these secrets, and every area feels like it's hiding something worth finding. You'll be wandering along, spot a suspicious crack in the wall, and boom, there's a hidden treasure. Or a fairy. Or you'll dive into a cave and find a guy who just, gives you a bottle. Why? Who knows? But I'll take it. Also, I forgot how many fairy caves are in this game. Seems like they are everywhere I turned. And as I progressed and the dungeons got harder, I wasn't complaining. I like these games, but I never said I was good at them. Gotta max out those bottles with fairies, am I right? Getting to the first dungeon was fun as I went and did some grave robbing, because, you can. And the first dungeon, again, reinforced the fun of this game. It was straightforward with some good puzzles, but you really feel this sense of progression, and you get these new items to boot. And in classic Nintendo fashion, the dungeons progressively introduce new mechanics and get harder. The same brilliant design of modern Zelda games and even Mario games are in full display here. The second dungeon had a bit more tricks throwing me off, but eventually I figured it out, and it was pretty quick and straightforward. But the Samworn boss was dumb. I couldn't hit the stupid things, and I didn't realize until a fairy popped out and revived me that I was being hit by these rocks flying all over the place.
Finally, you stupid worms! Ooh, my 7th heart.
But the exploration isn't just about the dungeons. As I left to head for the third dungeon, I noticed there was this monument that I could read with my handy-dandy book, but I had no idea how to reach it. I looked around, tried to figure it out, but nothing yet, so I figured this was something that I'd have to come back to. So my adventure continued, until I stumbled upon a forest with a kid playing a flute, probably an ocarina, that disappeared as I approached with the animals departing.
This game is teasing me.
After I beat the third dungeon and got all 3 pendants, I knew it was time. Time for that defining moment in gaming. That iconic scene. That dream cake design that I want for my birthday someday. What? I entered the Lost Woods, made my way through, and finally happened upon it. The Master... Oh, wait, no, this one's a fake. The Master Sword! And just as I finished this iconic scene, I got a distress call from Zelda and was thrust back into the action again. I'm coming, my princess. But first, I need to do some backtracking to get my shield upgraded. More arrows, my sword flip is for swimming. Sorry, Zelda, I need some R&R out in Lake Hylia. Fortunately for you, all of these Zora are still trying to kill me. So I'm back on my adventure. Man, this game never let up. The pacing is so good. Eventually, I went to go kick the wizard's butt and got sucked into the Dark World. But I mean, it was all worth it to hear that Dark World theme. I was already having a good time with this game, but I think it was at this point when it really hit me just how good this game is. It's good because it's fun. The light world has just enough to explore and do that if you go looking around, you're constantly finding new caves, items, heart pieces, and more. This game has nailed pacing of story, dungeons, exploration, without anything in particular overstaying its welcome. But now I'm in the Dark World, and Mr. Telepathic Sage is telling me that there are 7 maidens to save. I've just done 3 dungeons and got the Master Sword, and you're telling me I have at least 7 more? Let's do this, fam. The Dark World dungeons got much harder. I kept finding myself hunting for fairies to stay alive, but as much as I was exploring and finding the talismans that do these crazy magical attacks, I didn't even realize that I should actually use those things until I was sick of dying and tried one. When the entire room cleared, I realized that walking around and slashing my sword with no other usage of items was definitely a me problem, not a design problem. Even so, some of these bosses just showed me how rusty I've become with some of these older games. Each dungeon requires you to use certain items to progress. Things like bombs, your bow, or whatever item you get in the dungeon. But that doesn't mean you have to be an idiot like me and only swing your sword around without making use of your epic magic items or talismans or things to clear out enemies. Some of these enemies hit hard, so you may die a lot. At least I did. But hey, you know, it's all part of the experience, am I right? With all that said, it's really cool to realize just how creative this game wants you to be. Enemies aren't just there to be defeated, they're often part of the puzzles themselves. And the final confrontation with Ganon, it was epic and hard, because I need to get good. And you've got to use everything you've learned to take him down, and when you finally do, that satisfaction is very real.
Yeah, eat it, Ganon, you pig-faced something or other.
Now, the one thing that I'll say is about the item management in this game. The fact that you have to open the menu up every single time you want to change an item is a bit of a pain in the butt. So if you're in a dungeon or you're fighting a boss frantically trying to swap weapons to survive, this menu system hasn't aged super gracefully. I can't say it took me out of the experience ultimately, but I figured it's worth mentioning. Final thing I'll bring up here is the overarching story. But don't worry, no major spoilers here, if you can spoil a 30-plus-year-old game. The story is pretty simple by today's standards: save the princess, defeat the villains, save the world, etc. But much of the story comes through the lore of the world, and the introduction of the light and the dark world adds this layer of complexity that was groundbreaking at the time, but it's still super cool. You're not just saving Hyrule, you're restoring balance to 2 intertwined realms, making for some pretty high stakes for our pink-haired hero. The story, lore, combined with the exploration makes this a blast to explore the world of Hyrule. And the replay value is high, even for a linear game, because the world is so dense with secrets. Even after beating it, you may find yourself thinking, did I check that cave? What's that weird stump? It's a game that begs to be revisited. So does The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past hold up to the nostalgia challenge? 100% yes. The exploration is still so much fun, the combat and item usage are still engaging, though that menu could use some work, and the world still feels so alive. Sure, it's not as flashy or massive as some of the modern Zelda titles, but that's part of its charm. It's a bona fide classic. So if you're looking for a game that defines what made the Super Nintendo era so special, this is it. Or if you're new to the franchise entirely, you can check this one out on the Nintendo Switch Online service. That, or you can get one of these bad boys and get the original cartridge. If you don't already own it, Nintendo Switch Online is the cheapest option. Speaking of these bad boys, as promised, I wanted to end this with my thoughts on the SupaBoy. Playing on this thing has been pretty cool. It's not the sleekest design, but I'm playing my Zelda cartridge in handheld and can plug it into my Super Nintendo or SupaRetron with the same save file. I know there are more convenient ways to play this, not excluding my Game Boy Advance copy, but this is really flippin' cool. As someone who grew up wishing for portable Super Nintendo gaming, this scratches that itch that I didn't even know I still had. That being said, there are some issues with it that I'd love to see resolved with possible future models. Number one, the start button is on the left, which makes it awkward for games like A Link to the Past where you're constantly opening the menu. I kept instinctively assuming it would be closer to my right thumb. Two, the buttons are a little stiff, which make extended gaming sessions less comfortable, especially for games requiring rapid inputs. And three, the design has some divots on your hands, but they don't quite accommodate the way I was gripping it during intense gameplay. This might be a my hands are weird problem, but a slightly more ergonomic design would go a long way. So, if they could soften the buttons, tweak the ergonomics, and adjust the button placement in future models, this thing could be amazing. But honestly, even as it is now, it's incredibly cool, and I had a blast playing Zelda on this thing. So comment down below on what other retro games you'd like to see me try out and give the old nostalgia challenge. Subscribe for more, and thanks for watching. See ya!